He trusted strangers for just one night, but when morning came, his car was destroyed. His belongings had disappeared, and the entire village had vanished without a single trace. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before we begin, make sure you join our YouTube family by subscribing and turning on the notification bell so you never miss a story. If you enjoy emotional mystery stories like this one, don't forget to like the video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, let's step into the story. The city never truly slept, and neither did the lawyer who lived at its center. His life moved between courtrooms filled with arguments and office rooms buried under files. Every day followed a strict rhythm. Wake before sunrise, drink coffee that had long stopped tasting like anything, review case documents, and prepare defenses for people whose lives depended on words carefully chosen. Success had come early to him. Colleagues respected his sharp reasoning, judges trusted his preparation, and clients believed he could solve impossible situations. Yet behind the professional image existed a quiet emptiness. Years of ambition had slowly replaced personal connections. Family visits became rare, phone calls shorter, and memories of childhood faded beneath responsibility. Late one evening, while the city lights reflected against the glass walls of his office, his phone rang unexpectedly. The number was unfamiliar. He almost ignored it, assuming it was another client emergency. But something compelled him to answer. The voice on the other end spoke slowly, carrying concern. His grandfather, who lived alone in a distant rural town several states away, had fallen seriously ill. Age had finally caught up with the man who once seemed unbreakable. For a moment, the lawyer said nothing. Images rushed back, summer visits as a child, long walks through open fields, lessons about honesty spoken without lectures, and evenings spent listening to stories under wide skies filled with stars. His grandfather had been more than family, he had been a foundation during years when life felt uncertain. Without hesitation, the lawyer closed his laptop. Deadlines suddenly felt meaningless. He packed a small travel bag, informed his office he would be gone indefinitely, and headed toward the parking garage beneath the building. The city surrounded him with noise as he began driving. Sirens, traffic lights, crowded streets, but gradually the chaos faded behind him. Highways stretched endlessly ahead, illuminated by rows of white headlights moving like rivers through darkness. Hours passed. Urban landscapes slowly transformed into suburbs, then farmland. Gas stations became farther apart. Radio signals faded into static. The sky deepened into a vast black horizon untouched by city glow. Driving alone allowed thoughts he usually avoided to surface. He wondered how many years had passed since his last long visit. Work had always provided an excuse. Another case, another responsibility, another reason to delay. Guilt settled quietly beside him as the miles continued. Near midnight, fatigue began to take control. His eyes felt heavy and concentration weakened. He searched for a motel or rest stop, but the highway remained empty. Road signs became rare, and his phone displayed no service. Eventually, he noticed a narrow road branching off the highway. At the end of it, faint yellow lights glowed through trees, suggesting a small settlement. Relieved, he turned the steering wheel and drove toward it. The village appeared modest and old-fashioned. Wooden houses stood close together, some with peeling paint and dim porch lamps. A few parked vehicles lined the dirt road. The air felt colder there, quieter than anywhere he had passed before. As his car stopped, several residents noticed him immediately. Their expressions carried caution at first, understandable toward a stranger arriving late at night. After a brief moment, curiosity replaced suspicion. An elderly resident approached slowly, asking if he needed help. The lawyer explained he was traveling to visit family and simply needed a place to rest for the night. The response surprised him. Instead of hesitation, the residents welcomed him warmly. A small home opened its doors. Inside, the atmosphere felt humble but inviting. The smell of freshly cooked food filled the air. Someone placed a warm plate in front of him without asking for payment. Another brought coffee and asked about his journey. Their kindness felt genuine, almost disarming. After hours of isolation on the road, human warmth felt comforting. They spoke casually about travel, weather, and long drives. No one asked intrusive questions. No one appeared threatening. Laughter occasionally filled the room, creating a sense of belonging he had not felt in years. Exhaustion eventually overcame conversation. A guest room was prepared with simple blankets and a small lamp. The lawyer thanked them sincerely, feeling grateful for unexpected generosity. As he lay down, silence surrounded him. No traffic noise, no ringing phones, no city distractions. Sleep arrived quickly and deeply. For the first time in months, his mind rested completely. Morning sunlight slipped through thin curtains, waking him gently. For a brief moment, he forgot where he was. Then memories returned. The journey, the village, the kindness of strangers. He dressed quickly, eager to continue his trip. Opening the front door, he stepped outside and froze. His car stood where he had parked it, but something was terribly wrong. The tires were gone. The hood hung open. Engine parts had been removed with precision. Windows were partially broken. The interior was empty. His bag, documents, wallet, and electronics had vanished completely. Shock held him motionless. He walked closer, touching the cold metal as if expecting the damage to disappear. Nothing made sense. The careful dismantling suggested planning, not random vandalism. He turned toward the houses, ready to ask for help. But the village had changed. Doors were shut. Curtains closed. No voices answered his calls. The same homes that felt alive hours earlier now appeared abandoned. Even the air felt heavier, as if sound itself avoided the place. He knocked repeatedly on nearby doors. Silence. Walking down the road, he searched for anyone, any sign of life, but found none. The settlement looked empty, almost lifeless, as though the night before had never happened. Confusion slowly turned into realization. The hospitality had been an illusion. Every smile, every conversation, every act of kindness had been part of a routine designed to gain trust. He stood beside the dismantled car for a long time, struggling to process betrayal. Losing possessions hurt, but what troubled him more was the calculated manipulation of human kindness. Eventually, survival instincts took over. With nothing left to recover, he gathered the few remaining items scattered near the vehicle and began walking toward the highway. The road stretched endlessly ahead under the morning sun. Dust rose beneath each step. Hours passed before a passing truck driver noticed him and offered assistance, driving him toward the nearest town. Though physically safe again, something inside him felt unsettled. Later that evening, he finally reached his grandfather's rural home. The old house stood surrounded by fields just as he remembered. Inside, the elderly man rested weakly but conscious. Seeing him brought relief beyond words. They spoke quietly through the night, sharing memories and silence equally. Yet, even while sitting beside the bed, the lawyer's thoughts returned repeatedly to the mysterious village. Why had those people chosen deception? What circumstances could transform hospitality into strategy? As darkness settled outside and crickets filled the air with sound, he realized the incident would not simply fade into memory. He had spent his life believing justice existed clearly between right and wrong. But somewhere along that lonely road, he sensed the truth might be far more complicated. And deep inside, he knew one thing with certainty. He would return to that village again, not for revenge, but for answers. The countryside moved at a slower rhythm than the city, yet the lawyer found no peace within it. Days passed quietly at his grandfather's rural home, surrounded by open fields and long stretches of silence broken only by wind brushing through tall grass. The old wooden house carried memories in every corner, faded photographs, worn furniture, and the faint scent of time itself lingering in the air. His grandfather's condition stabilized slightly, giving them moments to talk. They spent mornings on the porch watching sunlight spread across farmland, and evenings listening to distant sounds of nature replacing the noise of traffic he had grown used to. These peaceful surroundings should have brought comfort, but his thoughts remained trapped somewhere else. The village, every detail replayed endlessly in his mind. The warmth of the welcome, the shared meal, the calm sleep, and then the emptiness of morning, the dismantled car and silent houses. At first, he tried convincing himself to forget it. After all, possessions could be replaced. Insurance claims could handle financial loss. Returning to city life would allow the experience to fade into a strange travel memory. But something refused to let go. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was confusion. The people he met had not behaved like criminals. Their eyes showed fatigue rather than cruelty. Their kindness felt practiced, but not entirely fake. That contradiction disturbed him more than the theft itself. One afternoon, while his grandfather rested, the lawyer drove into the nearest small town. The town consisted of a courthouse, a diner, a gas station, and a county records office that looked older than most buildings he had seen in years. Inside, shelves overflowed with paper files, maps, and archived documents dating back decades. He introduced himself professionally and requested historical information about settlements located along the highway. The clerk hesitated at first, but eventually guided him toward old county maps. There it was. The village had once been officially registered as a farming community nearly 70 years earlier. Old census records showed families living there, children enrolled in a small school, and agricultural production that supported nearby towns. Photographs attached to archived reports displayed smiling residents during harvest festivals, tractors lined across open land, and community gatherings filled with life. The place had not always been forgotten. As he continued reading, the story darkened. A prolonged drought struck the region decades ago, destroying crops year after year. Farmers borrowed heavily to survive, expecting recovery that never came. Banks repossessed land. Businesses closed. Young families moved away seeking stability elsewhere. Government assistance programs were proposed but delayed due to budget conflicts and administrative errors. Without economic support, the remaining population shrank rapidly. Infrastructure deteriorated. Roads were no longer maintained. Medical services withdrew. Eventually, the settlement disappeared from most official maps. But records showed something else. Police reports from neighboring counties described repeated complaints from travelers. Vehicles found abandoned with missing parts. Reports of friendly villagers offering overnight shelter, followed by theft discoveries the next morning. Witness descriptions matched almost perfectly. The pattern had existed for years. The lawyer leaned back in his chair, absorbing the information slowly. What he experienced was not a single crime, but a survival system built over time. He left the records office carrying copies of documents and drove toward the highway again. This time, he stopped several miles away from the settlement, observing from a distance during daylight. From afar, the village looked quiet but not empty. Thin smoke rose from one chimney. A figure moved briefly between houses before disappearing. Life existed there, hidden but persistent. Returning to his grandfather's home, he shared everything he had learned. The old man listened carefully, eyes thoughtful despite weakness. After a long silence, his grandfather spoke softly. "When people are forgotten long enough," he said, They stop believing the world remembers them at all. The words stayed with him. That night, sleep did not come easily. He walked outside beneath a sky crowded with stars rarely visible in cities. For years, his career had taught him to see law in strict categories: victim and offender, right and wrong, guilt and innocence. But now, he questioned whether justice could exist without understanding cause. The next morning, he visited the county sheriff's office. Presenting himself formally, he described his experience and provided documented evidence linking multiple theft cases to the same settlement. Initially, officers showed skepticism. The area had long been considered low priority due to limited resources. However, when he organized the reports chronologically, the scale became undeniable. An investigation began. Instead of demanding immediate arrests, the lawyer proposed a controlled plan. He suggested returning to the village himself while officers monitored nearby. The goal was not confrontation, but confirmation, understanding how the operation worked and identifying those involved without escalating danger. Authorities agreed cautiously. Preparation took several days. Officers mapped hidden observation points along tree lines surrounding the settlement. Communication devices were tested. Emergency procedures were established. During this time, the lawyer experienced growing internal conflict. Part of him felt responsible for exposing people who clearly struggled to survive. Another part recognized that allowing the crimes to continue meant more victims would suffer the same betrayal. He visited his grandfather before leaving. The elderly man held his hand firmly despite weakness. "Justice," the old man said quietly, "is strongest when it remembers people are human first." Those words followed him as he packed for the return journey. Unlike the first visit, this drive carried tension instead of curiosity. The familiar highway appeared darker, heavier with expectation. Every mile felt deliberate. As sunset approached, the narrow road leading to the settlement appeared again. He slowed the car, breathing steadily. Hidden beyond sight, officers waited according to plan. Turning onto the dirt road, he entered the village once more. The houses stood unchanged. Porch lights flickered on as evening settled. Residents noticed his arrival and approached cautiously, repeating the same pattern of curiosity followed by welcoming warmth. The familiarity was unsettling. He was offered food again. Conversation flowed easily. No one recognized him from before, or if they did, they showed no sign. Their behavior remained calm, practiced, almost routine. Yet this time he observed carefully the exchanged glances, subtle signals between residents, and moments of silence when certain topics arose. Night deepened. Eventually, he was guided to a guest room identical to the one he remembered. He thanked them politely and lay down, pretending exhaustion while remaining fully awake. Outside, darkness covered the settlement. He waited. Every sound sharpened his awareness: the creak of wooden floors, distant footsteps, whispers carried by wind. Hours passed slowly, stretching tension into near unbearable silence. Then, sometime after midnight, faint movement began outside. Through a small gap in the curtain, he saw shadows approaching his vehicle. The pattern had begun again, and this time, the truth would finally be revealed. The morning the truth finally surfaced began quietly, almost deceptively peaceful. A pale American sunrise stretched across the fields beyond the village, washing the abandoned houses in soft, gold light. Birds moved freely between broken rooftops, unaware that years of fear and silence were about to end. The lawyer stood outside the sheriff's vehicle, staring at the empty street that had once welcomed him with warmth, food, and smiling faces. Now it looked like a stage after a performance. Props left behind, actors gone, truth waiting beneath the dust. For weeks, he had traced documents, interviewed former residents, studied county archives, and followed trails that most people had long forgotten. What began as a personal loss, a stolen car, missing belongings, humiliation, had transformed into something much larger. The village itself was a lie carefully maintained for decades. The sheriff approached him slowly, holding a folder thick with reports. "We confirmed it," the sheriff said quietly. "Property records were manipulated, identities falsified. This place never officially existed as a registered community." The lawyer nodded. He already suspected that. The villagers were not ordinary residents. They were part of a coordinated criminal network that moved from rural area to rural area, occupying abandoned settlements and targeting travelers. They offered hospitality, gained trust, and then vanished overnight after stripping victims of valuables and vehicles. But this village held a darker history. Decades earlier, it had been a mining settlement abandoned after an industrial collapse. Families left, businesses shut down, and the land fell into legal limbo. Because ownership disputes were never resolved, no authority monitored the area closely. Criminal groups discovered the loophole and turned the forgotten town into a temporary trap. The lawyer had uncovered testimonies from truck drivers, missing person reports, and insurance claims dismissed as accidents. Many victims never realized they had been robbed intentionally. Some believed mechanical failures or random theft had occurred elsewhere. He was the first to connect every incident. And now, law enforcement was ready. By midday, unmarked vehicles surrounded the outskirts of the village. Officers moved carefully through empty homes, collecting fingerprints, abandoned tools, and hidden storage compartments beneath floorboards. Inside one house, investigators found stacks of fake identification cards. In another, they uncovered dismantled car engines carefully sorted for resale. Behind a barn, dozens of license plates lay buried under dirt. The lawyer watched silently. Each discovery confirmed that the kindness he experienced had been rehearsed. Every smile, every shared meal, every polite conversation had been part of manipulation. Yet, strangely, he did not feel anger anymore. He felt clarity. That night months ago, when he first arrived tired from travel, he remembered how genuine everything seemed. The warm lights, laughter from distant houses, children running across yards. It disturbed him to realize how easily trust could be engineered. The sheriff joined him again. "We tracked financial activity linked to pawn networks in 3 states, he explained. "Your case helped us connect everything. Arrest teams are already moving." The lawyer looked toward the horizon. "Then it ends today," he said. But endings rarely arrive instantly. Over the next 48 hours, coordinated arrests took place across several counties. Former villagers were found working temporary jobs under false identities. Some attempted to flee, others surrendered quietly. During interrogations, a pattern emerged. Many participants were recruited because they needed money or were escaping troubled pasts. The operation's leaders exploited desperation, convincing recruits that travelers were wealthy strangers who would recover financially. Crime justified by survival. The lawyer attended one of the hearings weeks later. Sitting in the courtroom, he listened as evidence unfolded piece by piece. Surveillance photos, financial transfers, witness testimonies, all connected back to the abandoned village. One suspect finally admitted the truth. The hospitality makes them relax, the suspect confessed. If people feel safe, they don't protect themselves. The words echoed in the lawyer's mind long after the hearing ended. He realized something important. The story was never only about theft. It was about how easily trust could be weaponized, and how silence allowed injustice to repeat. When the trial concluded months later, several leaders received long prison sentences. Others faced charges related to fraud, organized crime, and property destruction. Authorities announced plans to permanently secure the abandoned village site. News outlets covered the case nationwide. Headlines called it The Vanishing Village Scheme. Reporters described the lawyer as persistent, determined, and unusually patient. But he never accepted praise comfortably. He knew his involvement began by accident. Anyone could have been the victim. After the legal proceedings ended, he returned alone to the village one final time. The government had already begun demolition. Bulldozers stood near collapsed houses, preparing to erase structures that had sheltered deception for years. He walked slowly down the main road, remembering his arrival, the smell of food cooking, the soft glow of porch lights, the relief he felt believing he had found kindness in an unfamiliar place. He stopped where his car once stood dismantled. Grass had begun growing through cracks in the pavement. Nature was reclaiming the space without judgment. For a long moment, he simply stood there. Losing his belongings had felt devastating at first, but the journey afterward had changed him more profoundly than he expected. He had rediscovered why he became a lawyer, not for prestige or success, but to uncover truth where others stopped looking. A construction worker approached politely. "They're clearing everything tomorrow," the worker said. "Town won't exist anymore." The lawyer nodded. "Maybe that's for the best." As he turned to leave, he noticed something half-buried near the roadside, a small metal object reflecting sunlight. Curious, he bent down and brushed away dirt. It was part of his old car's emblem. Damaged, scratched, but recognizable. He held it in his hand, surprised by the emotion rising in his chest. It wasn't valuable. It wasn't even functional. But it represented the beginning of everything that followed. Instead of anger, he felt gratitude. Because loss had forced him to see deeper. He placed the emblem into his pocket and walked back toward his vehicle, the replacement car he had purchased months earlier, earned through honest work rather than recovered property. As he drove away, the village slowly disappeared in the rearview mirror, just as it had vanished once before. Only this time, the disappearance meant justice. Years later, the case became part of legal studies discussing rural fraud operations and psychological manipulation. Law students analyzed how patience, research, and empathy helped uncover a complex criminal structure. The lawyer occasionally lectured about the experience. He never described himself as heroic. Instead, he told audiences something simple. Trust is not weakness. But trust without awareness can be exploited. The goal isn't to stop trusting people, it's to protect truth when trust is broken. After one lecture, a student asked whether he ever regretted stopping in that village. He thought carefully before answering. "If I hadn't stopped," he said, "those crimes might have continued for years." Sometimes, the worst night of your life becomes the reason others are protected. Outside the university building, evening sunlight stretched across the parking lot. Students laughed, cars moved normally, and life carried on without hidden schemes or disappearing towns. Ordinary safety. Something he appreciated far more now. Driving home that evening, he passed through open countryside, similar to the road where everything began. Fields rolled endlessly beneath the sky, peaceful and honest. He no longer feared unfamiliar places, but he observed more closely. He listened more carefully. And he understood that justice often starts with a single person refusing to accept confusion as coincidence. The story of the vanished village eventually faded from news cycles, replaced by newer headlines and different tragedies. Yet its impact remained. Improved rural monitoring laws, better coordination between counties, and renewed awareness about organized fraud. For the lawyer, life returned to routine cases and everyday legal work. Still, every time he helped someone recover from injustice, he remembered the quiet morning when he stood among empty houses and realized truth had finally caught up with deception. One autumn afternoon, years after the case closed, he opened a drawer in his office and found the old car emblem again. He smiled faintly. Not because of what he lost, but because of what he discovered afterward: resilience, purpose, and the understanding that even betrayal can lead to meaningful change. Outside his office window, the city moved endlessly forward, and somewhere beyond distant highways and forgotten fields, the land where the village once stood had become open countryside again. No traps, no actors, no lies. Just silence, the kind of silence that comes only after justice has spoken. And for the first time since that long night of misplaced trust, he felt completely at peace.